The Jacksonville Jaguars have released their first unofficial depth chart ahead of their first preseason game against the New Orleans Saints. And I thought there were some surprises from the Jaguars releasing their depth chart. Now, we're going to break all of that down. Plus, the Jaguars made a couple of roster moves today that I wanted to kind of dissect and break down with you guys, along with just some other takeaways from training camp today. So without any further ado, we're going to get into today's show. But guys, if you want the latest Jaguars news and rumors, you guys could actually give me a follow on Twitter at Cullen Brown NFL. I'm constantly tweeting about the Jacksonville Jaguars. If the Jaguars, make a move or there's something going on Twitter, I'm constantly tweeting about it. So if you guys want to give me a follow, I'd greatly appreciate it. It's at Cullen Brown NFL. So thank you guys so much. And let's get into this Jaguars depth chart kind of breakdown here. And I wanted to kind of show you guys a visual of what it looked like. So hopefully this image and everything, the text is clear enough for you guys to try to zoom it in. So without any further ado, let's just kind of break it down here. So obviously, no shocker, right? Trevor Lawrence is going to be your quarterback one, along with, again, Nick Mullins, Carter Bradley, Joey Aguilar, just to name a couple of others. You look at some of the other places on the depth chart. Obviously, your big three at wide receiver, Parker Washington, Brian Thomas Jr., and Jacoby Myers lead the way, with Travis Hunter as a notable kind of backup on the wide receiver depth chart. Now, again, could that potentially change come the season? Maybe, but I think for the most part, Travis Hunter is going to be a starter at cornerback. You've also got a noteworthy kind of note here. Bashal Tutin or Chris Rodriguez is slated as his team's kind of RB1 with LaQuint Allen, Amir Abdullah, and then you've got DJ Dallas and Jamari Taylor. So that's kind of an interesting note that we'll talk about here in just a moment. And then tight end, obviously, Brenton Strange, Nate Borgature, Tanner Koziel there at tight end 3, which is also a nice note. He's had a really good camp so far. Quinn Morris, Patrick Herbert, Hunter Long, and Ethan Connor as well. And then the biggest takeaway, at least on the offensive side of the ball, which we'll break down here, Anton Harrison listed as this team's starting left tackle, along with left guard Ezra Cleveland, Robert Hainsey at center, Patrick McCarry at right guard, which is noteworthy considering he's pretty much hardly participated at all at training camp as he kind of gets ramped up here before the start of the 2026 NFL season. And Walker Little slated to be this team's starting right tackle there for Jacksonville. We'll kind of also just break down the entire depth chart and then kind of go into my number of takeaways here. We'll go to the defense side of the ball. Devon Hamilton is set to start at nose tackle alongside Eric Armstead there on the interior. Josh Hines Allen, Trayvon Walker, no surprises there, starting at defensive end. Foye Oluokun right now is set to start alongside Ventrell Miller or Branson Combs. That is the number one positional battle on the defensive side of the ball. Keep an eye on that. But Dennis Gardeck set to start there more as like kind of a pass rusher and only base downs at the linebacker position, but you'll see him obviously play a lot. Then you've got Monteric Brown, Jordan Lewis, and Travis Hunter. They're starting at the cornerback positions with Eric Murray and Antonio Johnson at safety. Cam Little, Logan Cook, Ross Matisic there with Parker Washington starting at punt returner, and Bashal Tutin and LaQuint Allen there at kick return. So just a couple of notes there. You obviously see Caleb Bransall there behind Antonio Johnson, Jabbar Muhammad, Jarian Jones, Christian Braswell. There's kind of the depth corners. Yasir Abdullah, Jack Kaiser, Danny Strigo, BJ Green, Matt Dickerson, and Albert Regis. So just kind of some breakdown there, and hopefully it's able to be visual there for your screen. My number one kind of takeaway from this kind of Jacksonville Jaguars depth chart / kind of noteworthy thing that I wanted to kind of touch on here is Anton Harrison. There's some legitimate smoke, as I nearly kind of really stutter there. I apologize. Here is the kind of picture that I'm seeing at the left tackle position. Anton Harrison, where maybe if you would ask me last week, is he going to be the Jaguars starting left tackle for week 1 of the 2026 NFL season? I probably would have leaned, I would still go with Cole Van Landen. Just the longer and the further we get and the closer we get to week 1, I think there's some real chance that Anton Harrison is this team's starting left tackle, where it's noteworthy, right? Because he's been the right tackle here in Jacksonville pretty much his entire career in the National Football League. Previously at Oklahoma, he was a left tackle. So going to be an interesting discussion point that we're going to break down here on today's episode of Jags Now. We'll get into more kind of depth chart reactions here in just a moment, but we would not be able to do today's show, guys, if it wasn't for our wonderful friends over at Prize Picks. Today's show is sponsored by Prize Picks, America's #1 sports picks app. Baseball is well underway, along with a ton of other sports that you can cash in with on Prize Picks. Football is right around the corner. So make sure you're locked in with Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to win cash while watching sports. It's available in most states, including California, Texas, and Florida. And you guys can even follow me on the app to see all my lineups at Cullen Bro 21, including this little 3-player season, football season long lineup that I've got for you guys. Justin Jefferson, I think he's going to have a bounce back year. Kyler Murray was actually named the starter in Minnesota. Give me the more on his receiving yards. BTJ, I'm back on it, man. I think BTJ is going to have a bounce back season. Give me the more on his receiving yards. And then Luther Burton, although he did suffer an injury the other day, I do think he is going to have a really good season for Chicago. Give me the more on his receiving yards. Guys, new user offer alert. Play your first $5 lineup, and if you win, you get $150 in lineups if you win in bonus lineups. Just use code HMA when you sign up. That's right. Prize Picks just switched up their offer, so there's no better time to join. Lock in and win that first lineup. Let's go to HMA at sign up to get $150 in bonus lineups if you win your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, code HMA. Download the app now to see the greatest daily fantasy sports app known as Prize Picks. It's good to be right. All right, so now we kind of switch back here to the depth chart. And look, Anton Harrison, who's primarily been this team's left tackle with the ones throughout training camp, man, it just feels like this is the way that, last year it felt like, okay, and this could all change, right, by the start of week 1 and before they kick off against the Cleveland Browns. It just feels like this year might be a little different as compared to last year. Like last year, they experimented with Anton Harrison at left tackle amongst different other kind of combinations. And, they ultimately decided that Anton Harrison would stick on the right side. If you're telling me Cole Van Lanen is A, not going to play, or B, he may potentially not be at 100%, which I don't think you can rule either one of those two options out at this point. Anton Harrison, to me, is the clear number one. If I had to draft somebody on the Jaguars roster to play left tackle, he'd be the pick. And I know that some people might be like, well, Cullen, do you really want to move him from right tackle where he's been, his entire NFL career? Do you think that would be a correct move? If it's in the best interest of the Jaguars, and if Liam Coen and this kind of offensive coaching staff believes that Anton Harrison protecting Trevor Lawrence's blind side, he should be the pick at left tackle. And I have no doubt that the transition, he mentioned it the other day, it feels like he's riding a bike. I think that there is no doubt in my mind that Anton Harrison could make it work. Walker Little at right tackle, obviously wouldn't necessarily feel the greatest about it. He hasn't played right tackle since, I want to say, 2024, I believe, or maybe it was at times. No, it wasn't. It wasn't 2024. He didn't play well at right tackle. So do they potentially experiment with Wyatt Milam, Shumandoga? There's a bunch of different combinations that they could go with. Even maybe Cole Van Lanen and not at 100%. Does he potentially make a start at right tackle? A lot of different things. Keep an eye on the Jaguars and what they do with their offensive line. Now, Liam Coen did announce today to Jaguars media members that starters would not be playing in the preseason game against the New Orleans Saints. However, they do expect a majority of them to participate in the training camp practice set to take place before, obviously, the preseason game, the dual practice between both the Saints and the Jaguars. So something to keep an eye on there just to see what the Jaguars roll out. Offensive line is the number one takeaway that I got from this depth chart, along with just a couple other, just to mention the other battles that are mentioned on the depth chart, right? Because you don't see, as I kind of hover over with my mouse here, this or on a lot of positions. In fact, you only see it really with two, right? It's the running back position and it's the linebacker position between Ventrell Miller and Branson Combs. Now, just to kind of touch on Miller and Combs before we get to Tune Rodriguez, because I have more to say on that. Miller and Combs, we kind of knew, right? This would be a training camp battle to start opposite of Foye Oluokun in nickel packages, really to be that secondary linebacker that's on the field primarily of the time with, defenses loving to play more defensive backs nowadays. Ventrell Miller, it seems like he kind of had a bounce back after Branson Combs kind of showed him his stuff there in training camp. And I think this battle could potentially last all the way till week 1. So keep an eye on that. But I think the Jaguars know what they have at this point in terms of Miller, great run defender, great communicator. Branson Combs, more of a coverage linebacker, but could potentially be somebody that maybe the Jaguars feel like, hey, if he can really clean things up in the run game, could be the potential long-term answer alongside Foye Oluokun. So that's something to just keep an eye on. But I thought it was interesting. Even with Chris Rodriguez coming off a foot injury earlier this offseason, The fact that he's still getting listed, or in terms of the running back number one position between him and Bashal Tutin. This, I've tried to tell people this, and I've said this multiple times this offseason, but I'll continue to say it here. Chris Rodriguez will have a role in this Jaguars rushing attack. I get that Bashal Tutin, Liam Coen had the quote that they expect him to be big for him and that he's going to contribute. And I do truly believe that if I had to pick today who would be the better running back, I would say it is Bashal Tutin. However, the Jaguars, especially with their mock game, they kind of showed their hand a little bit in terms of like in between the 20s, there's a lot of Bashal Tutin. Third downs, they were giving LaQuinn Allen a lot of run. And especially goal line and short yardage, Chris Rodriguez would be the back that they would have go in those situations. I wouldn't expect that to change if I'm Jacksonville. So I think that, again, just a quick little fantasy plug here. If you're looking to potentially draft Bashal Tutin, make sure you kind of realize what you're getting into with Chris Rodriguez in this backfield. Because I think while fantasy-wise it may not be the fans' favorite, I do think for this Jaguars team, it is the best move kind of going forward. Just because also, too, we've talked about it, right? Like Tutin, Rodriguez, and Allen, right? Like they combined last year for not a lot of production, not a lot of carries. So with all three of them getting an increased role, it seems like before the start of the season, I do think it's smart for Jacksonville not to just throw the entire rushing attack workload on just one running back. So do expect Tutin and Rodriguez to have major roles in this Jaguars rushing attack for 2026. But these are just kind of, I'll just kind of scroll through here just to kind of show you guys the depth chart. Again, this is as of August 11th. Things can change. Nothing's set in stone yet, but these are just kind of some noteworthy takes that I had whenever I saw this Jaguars kind of depth chart being released. So keep that in mind as well. Some other kind of just Jaguars roster moves that were made that I wanted to discuss. Over the weekend, they signed Geron Christian to compete on their offensive line with a numerous amount of injuries that we'll get into here in just a moment. The Jaguars made sense for them to bring in an offensive lineman in Christian, who played at Louisville from 2015 to 2017, was with the Washington Commanders 2018 to 2020, played with 2021 the Houston Texans. In 2022, he was Miami Dolphins and Kansas City Chiefs. 2023, Cleveland Browns, Houston Texans. 2024, Cleveland Browns and Los Angeles Rams. 2025, the Dallas Cowboys and Denver Broncos. Before now, 2026, signing with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Long story short, this guy's been around the NFL for a good minute, right? And I think having somebody who has that offensive experience, didn't play much for the Denver Broncos last year. I talked to our Broncos guy before filming this. I think he may have gotten into one game. So, but nonetheless, in terms of like training camp and just needing bodies to be able to, run your stuff against ones and twos and everything and having that reliable depth, I think Christian, the signing made a lot of sense. Does he have a chance to potentially make the roster? I mean, you never want to say never with a guy, but I do think this is more or less a training camp body that, who knows, maybe you could prove me wrong and it ends up making this roster. But I think the Jaguars, in terms of if they're keeping 9 guys, which, if they're keeping 10, more than likely it'll be Chuma Doga. Maybe Christian can fight his way in there, but I think the Jaguars' kind of offensive line is set in terms of the names that they're keeping. In other news, they also made a move today in which they signed Amari Burney, who last played with the Columbus Aviators in the UFL. Before that, he played with the Las Vegas Raiders from 2023 to 2024. And it's another linebacker signing, as in a corresponding move. The Jaguars waived Keni-H Lovely, the corner, who I think was kind of on the outside looking in terms of that cornerback depth chart. So the Jaguars, again, signing another linebacker along with Jelani Tavai, who we talked about on a previous episode. They're, I think, continuing to try to see if they can create A, competition, but also B, just try to get some healthy bodies in there, because there were numerous players that were seen kind of on exercise bikes during Tuesday's practice, including Jack Kaiser, linebacker, right? Quinn Morris, tight end, Jalen McLeod, Emmanuel Pregnon, Quinn Bohanna. Zach Durfee was also rumored, and I believe Jordan Lewis also was off to the side in practice as well. So the Jaguars kind of making this move, I think makes a lot of sense. I think at corner, they feel pretty decent about A, their depth, and B, just kind of where they're at. And so they add another linebacker there in Burney. So definitely somebody who I think doesn't have a lot of NFL experience, but I think whenever it comes to this kind of training camp period, they just need bodies at the linebacker position. And based on early reports too, it sounds like Tavai could make a really big push to make this roster. Obviously has a lot of NFL experience, but he's apparently had the better reps when being compared to Parker Hughes, the Jaguars' 7th-round pick. So that's something to keep in mind there. But yeah, guys, the Jaguars making moves and obviously releasing their depth chart that I wanted to break down for you guys as we conclude this episode of Jags Now. I want to hear from you guys. What was your main takeaway from the Jaguars' first depth chart? Mine was obviously the offensive line and where Anton Harrison, not being or being listed as the team's left tackle. And then also I want to know from you guys, do you agree with the Jaguars not playing their starters for the preseason game? I talked about it on a short here on the channel, but just to kind of reiterate things here, I think in the second offseason under Liam Coen, like if you're not a player that's fighting for playing time or fighting to make the roster, to me, there's no real sense in throwing them out there, especially for this first preseason game. And to be honest, if I'm Trevor Lawrence and some of these other guys, I may not even play this preseason at all. But I want to hear from you guys down below. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of Jags Now, presented by our wonderful friends over at Prize Picks. And we will have you covered throughout training camp, into the preseason, throughout preseason, into the regular season, surrounding your Jacksonville Jaguars. So hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications. And thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode. We will be back with another episode here shortly. So make sure you're locked in. Until next time, guys, peace out and have a great day.